Hi Moby, so nice to meet you. I'm Sukito Onamau, and I'm with Sunny Sadva, founder of Vegan Africa Fund. We're so happy to have you today with us for this new edition of Vegfest Morocco, and it's a real honor for us as we're very admirative of your work, your career, and of course your unconditional dedication to defend animal rights. All the people watching us know your music for sure, but you're also known for something other than being a pioneering musician and producer. For us and for the vegan community, you're one of the most dedicated and vocal artists when it comes to raising awareness on animal exploitation and building a better future for animals and the planet. So before we get started with some questions, it would be great to mention some of your actions to help animals. To name a few, you've opened a vegan restaurant, Little Pine, in LA in 2015, where 100% of the proceeds were going to animal welfare groups. You've wrote a book about factory farming called Gristle, From Factory Farms to Food Safety. You've also recently released a vegan cookbook with once again all the profits going to animals. And you've created the first all-vegan music festival, Circle V, with once again the profits, this time going to a specific org, Mercy for Animals. And finally, you've always been very proud and loud about veganism and animal rights on social media. So the first question I will ask you is the most obvious one, the one you've been asked a million times. What inspired you to go vegan, and for how long have you been vegan?
Well, like many people, I grew up with a very simple paradox, because when I was a child, I loved animals. I grew up in a house filled with rescued animals, and we had rescued dogs, rescued cats, rescued mice, rescued lizards, rescued everything. And I loved all these animals, but I also loved going to McDonald's, and I loved going to Burger King. And I never thought that that was a paradox because it was so common. And then when I was 19 years old, I was petting one of our rescued cats. His name was Tucker. And all of a sudden I realized, like, Tucker the cat had two eyes and a central nervous system and such a rich emotional life and such a strong desire to be happy and to avoid pain and suffering. And so in that instant, I realized every living being, especially those with two eyes and a central nervous system, have rich emotional lives and a deep desire to avoid pain, suffering, and death. And so that was 1984. And I went vegetarian in 1984. And then I started reading books like Diet for a New America, by John Robbins. That was a very important book for me. And so in 1987, I went vegan. So I guess now I've been vegan for 34 years.
Nice. That's absolutely amazing. I mean, you've been vegan 34 years. That's longer than most people I know, which to me says you're clearly a visionary. We see you were on this, which has now become a trend before it was trendy. And some people do become vegan very easily. It happens naturally for some of us when we open our eyes to how much harm the food industry is putting onto animals and the environment. And I think you said it so beautifully. The animals want to live. They don't want to suffer. And I think that's the part that a lot of people, are easy to embrace, that cognitive dissonance that you were speaking about. And sometimes, even though we're deeply convinced of our consumption choices, we have to face a sort of social pressure or isolation as vegans. And I'm wondering if you can share your experience around this. What's the biggest obstacles that you faced and how you were able to overcome them?
Well, it's funny because in some ways, I'm the wrong person to talk to about that.
It wasn't that hard.
Because I don't know what it is about me, but I've always, the moment I decide something for myself, I embrace it. And I largely don't care how other people respond. And again, I'm not saying this is a good thing. I'm just saying this is sort of how my brain is wired, that like, for example, when I was in 1982, when I became a punk rocker, I immediately rejected anyone who didn't accept what I was doing. Like, I just thought like, oh, I'm right, they're wrong. And I know that sounds arrogant, but unfortunately, well, for better or worse, when I make a decision, I feel like at the time, especially, I'm trying to make the best decision I can. And so if people don't get it or they don't agree with it, I sort of think something's wrong with them. And this is, and I'm almost feeling very ashamed and apologetic, because
Don't be.
I don't mind losing friends. I don't mind losing family members. To me, like, commitment to principle is so much more important than anything. And, but I understand everybody has different circumstances. And so, like, that's my experience. That's who I am. But for other people, I know that their families are very important. Their friendships are very important. To me, nothing is more important, especially the issue of animal rights and veganism. Like, nothing is more important than that to me. And so I would rather starve and die friendless and alone than do anything that would potentially harm an animal.
Wow. I want to sit with that for a second, because that's deep, but it reminds me of something someone recently told me, which is life becomes a lot more fun and a lot easier when you stop caring at all what other people think.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think I'm the wrong person to talk to about that, because I fully respect and appreciate other people's perspectives. I just know there's some weird switch in my brain, and the moment the switch goes from one thing to another, it's complete. Like, I have a lot of friends who, when they, they're vegan, but when they go home for family dinners, sometimes they'll compromise their veganism. And honestly, I would rather sit outside in the cold starving than compromise. And I almost don't say that as it's a good thing. I think it's perhaps too much single-minded rigidity on my part.
But it's interesting to get into the mind of Moby and see how you think. And something else that I want to get into picking your brain about is this amazing quote that we have from you that's really inspired me. And you said, "We've done hard things in the past. We've ended slavery. We've given everyone the right to vote. We've passed legislation prohibiting children from working in factories. We can do this. We have to do this. Our reliance on animal agriculture is literally killing us, and it's ruining our climate and our planet." So what today are the principal obstacles that we have to tackle in order to raise awareness and really manifest our vision and our shared goals regarding animals and the planet?
I mean, the main obstacle, it's a fascinating obstacle. It's a horrifying obstacle, but the main obstacle is what I call like ethical blindness or cognitive blindness. And I suffered from that as well. Like I said, until I was 19 years old, I loved animals, but I also loved Burger King. And it's so odd. I mean, I imagine that was the case before slavery was abolished, where people, loved the idea of equality, but yet at the same time, they didn't challenge slavery. And then one of the reasons why slavery fell is because people finally admitted that it was inconsistent to be a good ethical person and support slavery. And what's so odd, like, the truth is, everybody on the planet should have stopped using animals for food and sport and fashion a long time ago, because the majority of people on the planet, either they love animals, they like animals, or at the very least, they find the idea of animal suffering and butchering to be horrible and grotesque. But yet, as we know, 99% of the people on the planet still support it. And it's again, horrifying and fascinating that we have to convince people to act according to beliefs that they already have. Like it's rare when we go to someone and say, oh, you should care about animals. They already care about animals. I watched a Simpsons episode, an old Simpsons episode yesterday, and it was about Bart accidentally killing a bird, and he was so heartbroken, and his family was so heartbroken that he had killed a bird, and the whole episode was based around the fact that he had killed a bird, but yet in the next episode, they're all eating fried chicken. And so to your question, how do we simply say to people, guess what? If you're in any way disturbed by animal suffering, by animal death, you really shouldn't contribute to it.
Yeah, I think we have to address that. We have to break down these barriers, break down the cognitive dissonance, which I think really goes.
I'm sorry, just one other thing that's fascinating, like everything else we mentioned, like, abolishing slavery, ending children working in factories, giving everyone the right to get married, giving everyone the right to vote. Like, the funny thing about creating a vegan world is it's also delicious, enables people to live longer, enables people to be healthier. Like, just imagine if abolishing slavery had also been delicious. And by abolishing slavery, we had also, helped eliminate antibiotic resistance and saved the rainforests and helped eliminate climate change and lived longer. Like, people have done the right thing just because it's the right thing. In this case, it's the right thing for so many reasons. Plus, it's delicious.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to turn it over to Sukitoa for the next question.
Yeah. When it comes to animal activism and its different strategies, we've noticed two dominant trends, especially on social media. One that involves very shocking, disturbing images and videos showing how animals are being treated in slaughterhouses and factory farms. We know that this approach can be aggressive and is often criticized, but it is truly eye-opening and powerful. And on the other hand, there's a softer, more positive approach showing rescued animals living a peaceful and decent life in sanctuaries. And this strategy tends to show how similar they are to our pets, to dogs and cats, and can be a great tool to deconstruct speciesism. So we would like to know, how do you feel about these strategies? Do you think that one is more effective than the other? Or is there any other type of online activism that you have found more powerful?
Well, I think the key word is effective. And as activists, we constantly have to be asking ourselves, are we being effective? The goal of activism is not to make the activist feel good. The goal of activism is to change the world. And I know for myself, sometimes I'm guilty of engaging in activism that doesn't yield good results. And so I have to remind myself, every time I do something as an activist, as an animal activist, I have to assess whether it's effective. And for that reason, I mainly post the happy pictures. I mainly post the pictures of rescued cows and rescued chickens and rescued turkeys and rescued pigs. Like, I want to create that sense of emotional connection in people, partially because that's my audience. Like, my audience simply respond better to images of happy animals than to images of animals in slaughterhouses. So, but if I was 22 years old and playing in a hardcore punk rock band, I would probably go with I would at least include the more disturbing images, because the audience would respond to that. But I just know that, my audience tends to be a little bit more adult. And if I posted something really bloody, they would turn away. And I'm not afraid of posting the graphic images, but I've found that for me, they drive people away. but that's because of the people I'm trying to reach. I don't think there's anything wrong with posting the bloody images as long as it's making people question their relationship to animal agriculture.
Right. And yeah, I mean, you've been posting that before. Have you ever like posted these images, or you've always been into this kind of positive videos of animals?
Well, I would say I tend to go 90% happy animals and 10%. See, I don't like to show animals being killed. What I like to show is the narrative of before or after. Mm-hmm. You know, like one of the most effective videos I've ever seen is and I believe it was a French filmmaker, and it was used in the movie Unity by Sean Monson, who made Earthlings. The opening scene is a cow getting ready to go into a kill chute. Right after, actually, they're in the kill chute. They're getting ready to be slaughtered. And the cow's terror is so powerful and so obvious. There's no blood, there's no gore. And for me, that accomplishes more than blood and violence, is, showing the emotion, showing, and sometimes that means showing a slaughterhouse after the animals have been slaughtered, showing just, the stains, or showing, the terrified eye of a cow before it's slaughtered, like really going for the emotion as opposed to the brutal slaughter.
Yeah, the before and after, to connect with the animals. I would love to talk a bit about arts and politics. As a sound artist, I've been thinking a lot about the different ways I could use my work, my platforms for animals. And I've realized how important it is to connect and build a strong community of artists around these topics. So I would like to know, how can we as artists initiate a radical change for animals? How can we blend arts and activism in more powerful ways? Feel free to mention any initiative from the art scene or music scene that you have found interesting, or you could just share how you've been doing it yourself.
Yeah, it makes me think of the famous Marxist quote. And I'm not a Marxist, but the quote of, from each according to their ability to each according to their need. And everybody has a different strength. Everybody has a different audience. Some musicians are great at writing lyrics. I think of, some of the punk rock bands like Youth of Today or Gorilla Biscuits or H2O, who've written really powerful lyrics about animal rights and veganism. Other people are better at imagery. Other people are better at using social media. So I think it's up to the individual. The one thing I will say is we need to be, and maybe this goes without saying, but we need to be courageous. I see a lot of people being very cautious, and sometimes maybe that's okay. But I see people who are afraid to speak up about their belief in animal rights or their veganism because they're afraid of losing a few followers. And I try not to judge, but at the same time, defending animals is more important than than losing a few followers on social media.
Completely. Yeah, that was actually part of the questions. The question before, we wanted to ask you how can we encourage artists who are afraid to speak up about this because of their career. So yeah, it's a tricky one because I've never.
And everyone's different. I mean, if I'm lucky, I'm not married, I don't have children, so I can be kind of maybe a little, I wouldn't say courageous, but I can be a little more outspoken. If someone has children and a family and they're more concerned and they are having a hard time paying the rent, maybe I can understand being a little more cautious. But at the same time, we're talking about 1 trillion animals every year being killed by and for humans. This is the enormity of the crisis sort of is just so much more important than anyone's individual concerns.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really inspiring for me to think about courage in that light, because at the end of the day, this is so much bigger than one of us individually. This is truly a movement that's got trillions of lives at stake, like you said. And we have vegans from all over Africa and all over the world who are participating in the Vegfest Morocco activities, festivities. And I'm wondering if you have any message that you would like to share with our activists from Africa, from around the world, from vegans in Morocco, and to the festival, Vegfest Morocco.
Well, I guess what I'd like to share is just a simple thank you. You know, when I went vegan in 1987, I don't think, I mean, maybe there were 50 vegans on the entire planet. I mean, it was, you know, veganism back then was so weird and so small. And it's phenomenally inspiring to see how many people have sort of really committed themselves to this movement, you know. And as we know, like, there is nothing, I honestly believe there's nothing else any of us can do that's more important, you know, because not only are we saving animals, we're saving ourselves, we're protecting workers, we're reducing climate change, we're protecting the rainforests, you know, we're protecting against pandemics, we're, you know, this is so important. And so I just wanted to say thank you to you and to everyone who's watching, you know, for being such committed activists.
And thank you to you for being here and just reminding us that the trickle down effects are huge when it comes to veganism. We are, you know, having this amazing impact on the planet, our fellow citizens on this earth who are suffering from, you know, horrible conditions because they have to process this meat and this non-vegan products. And when speaking with you, this has been absolutely incredible. And it's really bringing us back to the reason why we are here and hosting this Vegfest Morocco this year, which is to honor another plant-based activist who's done amazing work for animal rights on the African continent, Jane Goodall. And I'm wondering if you have any reflections or messages for Jane Goodall.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. I've met Jane Goodall a couple of times.
Awesome.
And it goes without saying, but she is a superhero. And it's so fascinating. If you get the chance to spend a little time with her, she is so focused. You know, her entire life is activism. And it's so inspiring. You know, I think I can't think of anyone better for you to honor than her. I mean, she's, if I would say, if we had a saint, but a very smart, very, you know, very smart, incredibly rational, strategic saint, like she is, she's our saint. I don't mean ours as in like a vegan saint, even though she is. She's humanity's saint. And there are a few others, but she's definitely like, she's, I would say that she's at the top of the saint pyramid in my eyes.
Oh, I love that. Yes, she is on this earth to infuse it with as much good and love and compassion as possible. That is a very beautiful tribute and honor to Jane. Thank you for that. And, you know, as we're coming into this period in the African continent where industrialization is really kicking off, where the first factory farms are opening in, you know, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, just in the past decade or two, we're seeing the need now more than ever to amplify the vegan diet to a population in Africa that historically has been largely plant-based. And I'm wondering, how do you feel like the global vegan community can help support the vegan future of Africa?
Wow, that's such a good question. It's such a huge question. And I can't think of any perfect answer except to say we all, and I know this sounds vague, but we all need to do everything. You know, we need to do whatever we can. And again, it's, for some people, that's going to be running for political office. For some people, it's going to be shareholder activism. For some people, it's going to be starting nonprofit organizations. For some people, it's just going to be talking to family members, posting on social media. Like, I guess that's my encouragement to everyone is do everything as often as you can. And I know that sounds vague, but, you know, again, going back to the idea from each according to their ability, like everyone has such a unique talent and a unique sort of sphere of influence. It's really using that as well as possible.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful too, for us to all embrace our gifts. You know, the way I like to see it is all of us kind of have a superpower, right? We're all on this earth with something that we get to do and we get to share maybe better than others can. And to use that in our activism and through this process of growing the vegan movement is absolutely necessary. So thank you for that reflection.
Yeah, and like I said, it's so great because we're like, on one hand, we're saying, hey, you should save animals, but in the process, you're going to eat delicious food, you're going to live longer, you're going to be healthier, you're going to prevent climate change, you're going to protect workers. I mean, like, it's such a phenomenal, that's why we call it the Swiss Army knife form of activism, because there's so many aspects to it, which is really just so surprising why every rational person on the planet has not embraced this way of living.
Well, you know, we were talking before you came in about the new feature film that you helped executive produce that really should be eye-opening in a lot of ways. Meet the Future, which was directed by Liz Marshall, who will also be here with Vegfest Morocco. I would love for you to tell us about what inspired you to get involved with this project and what the impact you hope it has is.
Well, again, my approach to activism is to try to do everything. And sometimes that means, you know, giving money to politicians, supporting politicians, giving money to charitable organizations. It means supporting media, supporting products, supporting social media posting, other types of media. But as we've seen, documentaries are such an incredibly powerful part of our collective activism. You know, I think of Forks Over Knives and Cowspiracy and Seaspiracy and What the Health, Game Changers. Like, these documentaries go out into the world and they live there forever and they reach so many people. And so Meet the Future, I mean, Liz's movie, it's so specific and she did such a great job with it. If I'm being honest, I will never eat lab grown meat in my entire life. I'm thrilled that people are developing it. I'm thrilled that it's going to at some point replace animal-based meat, but I can have deep appreciation for and profound gratitude for the world of, you know, lab-grown meat, but I don't ever want to eat it. I'm just thrilled that it's out. The same way, like, to be honest with you, I don't love a lot of fake meat. You know, I really love vegetables. I love beans. I love grains. I love that fake meat exists. You know, I don't want to eat a deep fried Impossible Burger, but boy, oh boy, am I glad it's out there.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. Absolutely. You know, those familiar items are really helping a lot of people who wouldn't adopt a whole foods, plant-based diet that involves a lot of cooking and a lot of preparation. Really gives them the option to, you know, have something familiar on their plate while still reducing their harm, reducing their environmental impact, everything.
Yeah,
I'm
I mean,
so curious.
I was going to say, for example, there's a restaurant in Los Angeles called Monty's Good Burger. And it was opened by some vegan activist friends of mine, my friends Bill and Nick and a couple other people. And it is vegan fast food at its most fast food. You know, like, it's vegan burgers, it's tater tots, it's milkshakes. And if you go by there on a Friday night, there are 20 people waiting in line and they're all kids. They're like 22-year-old punk rock kids waiting in line. Nice. And it makes me so happy. And I never need to eat the food because I don't really like vegan junk food, but I'm so glad that it's there because there's so many 22-year-old kids who are hungover and they want vegan junk food. So God bless, I'm thrilled that it exists.
I'm absolutely thrilled with you.
Some vegans, I think, get to this point where we deconstruct flesh. We cannot like just. I know that I cannot have anything that's a bit like bloody and like plant-based hamburgers and stuff. So yeah, I think we get to that point after years of of veganism. Yeah.
Yes, at some point it's not really that appealing anymore. Definitely. And
I mean,
I'm
it was
wondering,
funny.
are there any projects
I did an interview.
that you're
I was just gonna say, I did an interview years ago about the development of lab-grown meat.
Ooh.
And I was also, I sort of said to them, I was like, yeah, it's very interesting that we're like, you know, doing lab-grown meat and all this. I was like, but what about beans? Like, beans are perfect. They cost nothing. They're good for you. They're good for the environment. I was like, well, but you know, I'm glad that lab-grown meat exists, but at some point I really hope humanity recognizes like, well, just eat more beans.
At least for our pets as well, because this is something we always get as an objection as a vegan when we have a cat, for instance, and people say, hey, well, you're vegan, but you have a cat and you feed him like meat, you feed him other animals. So I guess lab-grown meat will be finally a solution to this problem.
Yeah, and I will say one thing to that, and this is one thing I would like to say to everybody who's watching or who might see this, is we do not have the luxury of arguing amongst ourselves. You know, when I talk to activists, I have to remind them, we cannot fight each other. You know, and there's a lot of vegan infighting. There's a lot of animal rights infighting, and we don't have that luxury. We work for the animals. And if we are infighting, we're not helping the animals. That's just, it's a waste of time and energy. And so if someone has a cat and they're feeding the cat non-vegan food, I wouldn't do that, but it's not my place. Like, I don't argue with other animal rights activists. I don't argue with other vegans, because compared to the enormity of the problem, you know, the 1 trillion animals who are being killed every year, like, we can't fight amongst ourselves. We have an enemy, and it's the people who are killing 1 trillion animals every year.
And I know that you're not as into the fake meats and the meat substitute products, but I'm wondering if there's any, vegan products, whether it's an alternative materials or, agriculture, that you see yourself very excited about and see as, possibly revolutionizing the vegan experience and the vegan future.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm excited about everything. I'm excited about pineapple leather. I'm excited about mushroom leather. I'm excited about the Impossible Burger. I'm excited about, lab-grown meat. It all is so interesting, so exciting. Like, there's so many companies and entrepreneurs and people who are really working so hard on this. And I'm excited about all of it. I read this article, it was an interview with the man who started the Impossible Burger. And he said something so interesting. He said, meat is never going to get better. Animal products are never going to get better, whereas alternatives are always going to get better. Like the fake meats, the lab-grown meats, the grown leather as opposed to cow leather, the seafood that, the vegan seafood that's being made, like they just keep getting better. And so it's one thing that's really great is that, 20 years from now, all of these alternatives are going to be even better. Meat's going to be exactly the same. It's going to be bloody and disgusting, and it will always be bloody and disgusting.
And that even is so true already. Like, I think about when I first went vegan 6 years ago, vegan cheese was terrible. It didn't melt at all, didn't taste very good. And now fast forward to today, we have some of the most absolutely amazing vegan cheese alternatives that like even people who I have in my life who are addicted to cheese say that they enjoy and can actually help them reduce their dairy consumption.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the rise of plant-based milks, and it's like it's happened almost overnight. And now plant-based milks in Starbucks in many parts of the United States, plant-based milks are selling more than cow-based milks. So like it's so inspiring also to see how many of these entrepreneurs, they're activists. You know, like Ethan, who started Beyond Burger and Beyond Meat, like he's an activist. The people who started the Just Company, they are activists. You know, like some of them are billionaires now, but they're ultimately driven by that activism. It's really, it's very inspiring.
Yeah, I
Like
truly believe that.
to connect that to to the festival, because we don't have as much option in North Africa or in Africa in general, and I think that's one of the strategies African vegans have found was to adapt and revisit their own traditional dishes. So yeah, I think there's so much to do, like right now, to bring some of these alternatives as well in these countries, because yeah, I think when they crave cheese or other products, sometimes it can be very difficult to get them. Yeah.
And you know, it's interesting, and I know we only have a couple more minutes, but when you talk about the industrialization of Africa and the rise of industrial animal agriculture, it reminds me very much of like what happened in other countries like China, Korea, Japan, where they had traditionally mainly plant-based diets. And as the diets have moved away and become much more Western, that's when you see the rise of heart disease, of obesity, of diabetes, of cancer. So like, I mean, I know it's hard to generalize about the continent of Africa, unless you're George Bush and you call it the country of Africa. But yeah, that was a high water moment in American politics. But when I think of most traditional food is plant-based. And to replace that with industrial animal agriculture, it's evil. Like it's actually, because it's going to kill people. It's going to make people sick. It's going to destroy their families and destroy their health. And it's really tragic.
This is definitely something we've been discussing with some of our guests. I think Sunny, with Chef Cola, we've been talking about this, and I've been talking about a vegan cook from Paris, and we just realized how much the original diets were, totally, I mean, not totally, but mainly plant-based, and that it came with the colonization.
Well, great. Well, I know we only have a couple minutes. What else should we try to go over in these last couple minutes?
Well, we got through all of the questions we had planned out for you. This has been so much fun. Just getting to see your perspective. One of my favorite things about festivals is that they bring cultures together and allow for this merging and this conversation around issues that really unite us all, which is the vegan movement, which is advocacy for animals and uplifting the plant-based entrepreneurs and activists across the African continent. And so, I am wondering if Sukitoa wants to ask her any last questions and
maybe the outro. There's an organization you've created to help activists. I was wondering if it was active. I've seen a website, but I was wondering if you were working on it and trying to gather more people.
Oh, well, I had tried to start something called the Animal Echo Chamber.
Yeah.
And if I'm being completely honest, it just didn't work out.
Okay.
And also, as I was trying to push it, I realized a lot of other people were doing similar things much better than I was. So the Animal Echo Chamber was a way of sort of like amplifying the voices of activists. And I wish that it existed. I don't know why it didn't really work out. Maybe I should go back and try it again.
Which initiative you have in mind that worked out better?
Well, I mean, I think of an example like Plant-Based News has done such, I mean, like 10 times a day on my social media feed, they're pushing something. And there are a bunch of other sort of like animal vegan news aggregator sites, Sentient Media also, where it's like they're just doing a much better job than I was able to do with my Animal Echo Chamber, probably because they're working on it full time and and I was just doing it a little bit passively because I was working on a bunch of other things. So I'm really glad that all these people are doing it better than I did.
Okay.
Oh, I love that. It goes back to, I think, what was a theme of this conversation, which is that everyone has something that they do best, and you have to keep contributing in that way and keep doing it. Thank you so much,
Yeah, thank
Moby,
you.
for your time, for your energy, for your enthusiasm and passion about the animal rights and the vegan movement. It truly is the global vegan network coming together to support and uplift the African vegan network that I believe is going to enable the cruelty-free future we all need to see.
Well, thank you for talking with me, inviting me on here, and thank you so much for everything that you do as activists and people. And like I said, everything you're doing and everything that everyone who's watching is doing, it's very inspiring. So on behalf of the animals, thank you.
Thank you.